Hello and welcome to Tuesday night, and it's the Scotland Rugby News podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness is Egg-Shaped, and the man from Scotland Rugby News, the one and the only, Gavin Harper. Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. It's been an interesting time that no doubt we'll get to, so let's get cracking. Quick word from our sponsor to kick off. The Scotland Rugby News podcast is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV tonight. With thousands of jobs across Scotland, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs, so start your search today. Gav, 100 grand, I was told, if you get picked to go and be a British Lion, so they'll not be needing to go on to S1 Jobs for a while, I wouldn't have thought.
No, you wouldn't have thought so. Yeah, looking great to have 8 Scots in amongst it. I think when we sat last week, we confidently predicted probably 4 or 5, and then I think we were hedging our bets with another 2 or 3. Look, there's a couple that haven't made it that you'd be disappointed for, but 8 Scots, two tours in a row, I think is good going.
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot to it.
Sorry,
and
is that Andy Farrell on the phone to you?
Well, I would love to say it's Andy Farrell. It's actually Joe Smith. He's heard that I've been declined to the Lions, and he's actually found an Australian grandparent. So that's an exclusive right here on the Scotland Rugby News Tuesday night podcast. The thing that pleases me, and I wasn't very happy with Mr. Robertson with his view on the Welsh, because we've been there and it's sore. It does take away a little bit from the squad when it's not genuinely all 4 countries represented. But there's not much we can do about that. I'm pleased with the Welshmen that are getting to go. For what I can gather, Big Tobes is on the waiting list, and who knows what's going to happen between now and even the first game, never mind the first test match. So I think there's things to change, and lots of people are already predicting that now. We've got over the squad selection. Now it's right, who's not going to go and who's going to come in. But for the 8 that are getting to go, I think we were pretty confident about all of them. The question mark was Scott Cummings. But I'm really chuffed for him, because I think he's a bit different for us as a Scottish second row. We've not really got a second row that does what he does, and I think he does it really well.
Yeah, I agree, and I think actually that one selection, you can probably read into a lot of how Andy Farrell and the coaches envisaged that the Lions will play, because I think it would have been easy. There was a bit of chat the night before the squad was announced. Might Grant Gilchrist get in, because he's probably more like the other tight headlocks, if you like, where actually Scott does more of the sort of running about in the wider channels and is maybe a wee bit more of a ball player. So I think it says, the Lions fancy going to Australia and actually beating them by playing some rugby, rather than we're going to just bully them up front.
Scott Cummings runs unbelievable lines as well, but he can run because he's got some pace and he's got that explosive. He's able to, there's no point in me running a line because I'll get there by a week on Thursday. Whereas Scott Cummings is running at a pace that means even if he gets contact, he's still going to get beyond that point of contact. Yeah. And I think he does that so well. He's mobile. He obviously had enough in the tank. It's a selection as well, I think, that shows you it's not just based on what happened last Saturday.
Totally.
So the likes of Pollock he has done enough in the last few months since the Six Nations to say, right, I am in, because he wasn't getting picked before. Will Stewart possibly the same, but somebody like Scott Cummings shows this in the selection is not just based on the last 6 weeks. And I thought that was class. I thought it was really good I don't know him, never had anything to do with him, but for what I can gather, he's a good lad. The Gilchrist one, selfishly, I would love Gilco to go, and he's a leader and he's the kind of guy that'd be good around the squad, but unfortunately, I think it's probably come maybe 3 years too late, and the last one came maybe just a shade too early. It's just the Lions tours haven't really hit Gilco at peak Gilco, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, it's a shame. But I think that Scott Cummings has benefited. I think it also says that you can benefit from not playing. Scott's stock has clearly not fallen massively by missing the entire Six Nations. And he's, as you said, he's had enough kind of money in the bank that he was able to get himself in that squad. I think we said this last week, I'm not sure the second rows are as strong as probably the other areas. If you look at the centre, somebody like Robbie Henshaw's missed out entirely. And I think just before we came on, we were discussing that he might have been in our test team. So that probably shows you the quality of the back three. Think of Darcy not going, Jamie Ritchie in the back row, Ben White. But yeah, I feel like the second row is probably an area that if there were a couple of injuries, if somebody like a Maro Itoje went down injured, you would start quite quickly to be more concerned about other areas. But look, delighted for Scott, delighted for all 8 of them, and I hope that they all get a good crack at it, and I hope that they all make it. They are fit and available. I think that's the first thing.
I think it shows the strength of the back line to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the Scottish backs in there. That's not been the case for a very long time. Duhan's obviously got previous with the Lions, so's Finn. Hugh Jones, when he went south, that was an interesting move, but I think a lot of people outside of Scotland then realised how good he was. And we've heard a heap of pundits from south of the border saying how good Hugh Jones is. Also, him flirting a little bit with fullback, I think, has helped him become a better player. He was already very, very good, but I think that having to play somewhere else has helped. Sione, we were worried about fitness, but the same as Scotty Cummings, there was enough in the bank there. A leader named as captain, all of those things count as ticks in the box for him to go. Blair injured, but that since he left Edinburgh, his stock has just continued to increase. And then Xander and Pierre up front, boom, go for it. I think both of them will feature at some point in one of the 3 tests. If not, Xander and Pierre potentially. I don't think they're starting at the moment, but who knows what will happen. But then both of them could be featuring every test for the last 20 minutes, half an hour, and they come back with, as Test Lions. I think there's a great opportunity for Scottish players.
I think the other thing is we've talked about, we've been worried about Xander's injury or Duhan or whoever, and I must admit, the shots of Blair in his sort of knee brace celebrating with his fiancée were probably slightly concerning.
Hang on, let's rewind that a bit. I'm not sure many of us, you and I included in this, are sitting on our couch watching the telly with taps off. And even when it gets hot, I'm not sitting with my tap off. That's not. Now I know I'm not exactly got a rig like Blair Kinghorn, but come on, Blair, get a t-shirt on in the house.
Well, especially if you know that your missus has got her phone out and you might be announced in a Lions squad. But anyway, no, look, I think that's obviously a concern, but there is a chance that somebody like a Tadhg Furlong goes down and all of a sudden you could, it's a total argument that Xander then becomes first choice. And Furlong's had loads of injury problems. I keep referring to that. He's hardly played until the last few weeks. You're right, there is an opportunity. Andrew Porter is notoriously gets on the wrong side of some refs at scrum time, whereas if you want just a platform to go and play, Pierre could be the very guy to give you that, and I think there's a good chance for Cummings is probably the one that's an outside bet for the Test squad, but then a couple of good games on tour and a bit of luck goes his way. You never know. The rest you would think have got a good shot at making the Test team.
I think Pierre's probably the one. I would suggest at the moment Pierre is third. Porter, I think, is first choice, and Genge is that animal to bring on that's different. We all love Pierre, and we've seen him perform very, very well. But I think Genge has probably got a fair bit in the bank for being Pierre's still an impact. I'm not belittling that at all, but Genge to come on and just be horrible, I think maybe puts him ahead. But as you say, it'll be interesting to see. One of the other bits I think counts for Xander is he's proved he can be an 80-minute Test player. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to play him for 80 minutes because all the other tight heads are very capable and could come on and play, but I think that's Xander's shown that he's injured. Xander's shown he's durable and can last. That's got to be a positive. And I think Big Sione, it would be amazing to think you were getting Finn, Sione, Jones, Duan and Blair all starting in a Lions Test. That would be one for the record books, I would imagine.
Yeah, you'd think so. But look, there's one of them there hasn't played at all since January. One's played one game, so let's just wait.
Let's get excited. Let's get excited. Well,
it's great. It's great, and you talked about it right at the start. Like how often were I remember being at the 2013 announcement and thinking, "Oh, great, two Scots," and 2009 was the same. So for a long, long time, Scotland have been on the margins of Lions tours, and it shouldn't be like that. Wales, unfortunately, are in that position now. But while Scotland aren't, we should make the most of it.
Yeah, just two asides here. I think I speak for most of Scottish rugby and a fair chunk of other rugby that were gutted Darcy's not getting to go. But one other point that I'm going to raise that might be a bit contentious. Gregor Townsend's measurement as success as a head coach can be taken in lots of different ways, but to have 8 players selected for a Lions tour, and Gregor's been the Scotland coach for a long time. You could be, it wouldn't be too out of place to be saying that Gregor Townsend has had a big hand in that.
No, totally. And for all that we say, we were maybe talking about Gregor's future a month or two ago, like he deserves credit for the work he's done. I think the other thing to say, and all the players said it when we interviewed them on Thursday afternoon, is certainly the Glasgow ones, the work that Franco's done to get them into the kind of games that you can show yourself, and I think it speaks volumes that Scottish players are looked at favourably despite not having maybe the best Six Nations. I think the other thing, though, the other side of it is if you take 8 of Scotland's essentially starting 15 and say, okay, we think we can make them, they are the best of the players in Britain with our coaching. That says you finish 4th in the Six Nations, but we still think they are some of the best players in Britain and Ireland. We'll get more out of them than a 4th place Six Nations finish. So, who knows?
that opens up a whole load of other talking points.
It does.
How can half our starting 15 be British Lions, and we've said 6 of them Test, 2 maybe outside chances, but we finished 4th. But Ireland have got a stack load more in England, let's keep racking these up for these other day pods. Yes, that I'm not sure so. We're going to have to find a 9-day week to get this in. Let's get to Glasgow first, because it feels like we've almost turned the tables. Like, what's going on at Glasgow? And this week it just feels like ouch.
Yeah, it does feel like ouch, because I think the longer you see, the more that you see these players coming back, Hugh Jones and Sione's not far away, and Scott Cummings is back, and Max Williamson's back, and you think, right, okay, well, this was part of the reason that people pointed to for a bit of a drop in form, but actually it isn't getting any better. And I think that Leinster game has hurt them. I think that has clearly caused a few lasting scars. So it's tough. How do you get kind of past that? Well, clearly going there and putting right some of those wrongs this weekend would be a massive step. I think the other thing from a Glasgow point of view that I'm slightly sort of not sure about is that they keep talking about last season, like the parallels are all there, that they went to South Africa last year and had a couple of tricky games, came back in the last game of the season. They didn't play that well, if you remember, against Zebre at home. It was all a bit clunky. But they still, every week, basically, were able to put out the same first choice 15. And that's the big difference this year, is they're sort of patching together a team of who's available and who's fit. And I think, that's the big concern going into the playoffs, that you've got guys like Sione and Hugh, and, we've not seen Jack Dempsey since the Six Nations. They're going to have to come straight back in and be at 100%. And clearly that for Hugh, that wasn't the case in Italy.
But this time last year, everybody was saying, as long as Xander stays fit, because he was putting in unbelievable performances and minutes at this time last year, and he's not there.
Yeah. And I think the reality is Xander's probably not going to be there at all. Even if they get to a final, they're unlikely to have Xander. So it's a huge, with all the greatest respects to Assam Talakai, who probably is second choice, it's the one position that you look at and think that drop-off is still significant. And Talakai, I think, is the next best by a good distance. So that is undoubtedly a problem. And I don't know if that might be their undoing, depending on, you look at a quarter-final, it's hard to pick who they might get, but if they get Stormers again, the Stormers might go after them up front.
I'm just looking here at their last 4 games, and my maths that is challenged at the best of times. I reckon in 4 games they've scored 40 points. They got nothing against Leinster, 14 against Zebre, 19 against Bulls, and 7 against Benetton. 40 points, and it's way over 100 against. 52, 6, 26, 33. That's not the Glasgow we've come to know. Mr. Top of the Moon can maybe give us some in depth to that, but it just feels like something's happened. And I know that, but last year, but you can only reflect on that knowing that there was the most positive of outcomes happened. If the most positive of outcome doesn't happen again, then you're going, like you kind of compare it. It doesn't work. You can only compare to last year when you've got to the point of knowing what your measurement is. And at the moment, it just feels so weird. It just feels so different, because we've not been talking like this about Glasgow for quite a long time.
Yeah, and I think the other point to that is that, maybe 6-8 weeks ago, we were all talking about Franco, giving the Scotland job. Why doesn't he just basically fix Scottish rugby on his own? Well, actually, now he's had a great, and he has had a great year and a half, or nearly 2 years at Glasgow. But actually now he does have some problems to solve, and he does have his own sort of issues, and this will be a test for him and for his coaches as to how they respond to that. So look, it does feel different. I think you're right. The whole thing just feels like it's going a bit flat, and I think they need to kind of wrestle back some of that momentum this weekend. I think even if I'm reluctant to say this because I hate saying, oh, even if they're kind of plucky losers, but I just think we need to see more of real Glasgow, and a sign that they maybe have found sort of themselves again, because they haven't looked like Glasgow Warriors for quite a few weeks now.
It was class. No, I don't know why it was called an under-23 game rather than an A game, or what's in that. But I'm a big fan of seeing the players who train a lot getting to actually play. Now, Sean Kennedy, he must have been under-23 for about the last 14 years. But why not? He needs to play, and what a great guy to have in a changing room with a young team. And I know that there was some borrowed from Edinburgh there, but like, that's class. I know Edinburgh had that scheduled, and then when the Pope died, that all got kind of kiboshed. I think there's an A game coming up for Edinburgh. It would be amazing to see that mirror league. Now, I know these things cost money in it, but there's a lot of players who are spending a lot of time not playing.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's important that these players find meaningful game time. And actually, if you're taking one team to Benetton, go and take another team, and let's everybody have a game. And why don't we look at, and the sort of pipe dream I would like to see is that on a Friday at 5:00 or on a Saturday morning, you get a URC under 23s or a reserve league that gives guys regular and meaningful game time. That's not what we had with some of these guys before, who were thrown into that futures team in Super 6 or Super Series, and they just got absolutely battered because they were playing against experienced club players or, ex-pros. And you're right, like Sean Kennedy, I admire Sean Kennedy for putting his hand up to play on an under-23s, but like, you absolutely desperately need guys like that to, when it gets a bit tricky, and like Glasgow were miles in front in the first half in that under-23 game, and then Benetton came back, and actually I'm sure Sean Kennedy's contributions were important, because a lot of, with so much kind of inexperience around him, you need people that have got a fair bit of experience to kind of call upon.
Yeah, I like the under-21 idea. Many moons ago, Cammy Mather tried to get a club under-21 tournament up and running. Unfortunately, just wasn't the players to not have them in the club game and have them in an under-21 game. But the idea was sound, and that was coming from New Zealand. But to just have an A game, because I think there is a lot in it, like you've just said there with Sean, to not be playing with older players. I think you're losing something for everybody. For Sean to be a leader and pass on some of his experience, but for young players to see what it's like to have role models next to them, to have people that have been in those situations before. I would love to see an A league of some form or other, and I would love to go and watch that if they played on the Friday lunchtime and Edinburgh were playing on the Friday night, or Glasgow were playing. I think it would be class, and to have a curtain raiser on the Hive before the game at Murrayfield. We'd be magic. It would be such a great thing. And players want to play, but they want to play for their team. It's difficult when they get farmed out to clubs or they get put in. Tom Curry went to Italy. I mean, God love it. Like, yeah, I'll go to Italy and play a game of rugby. Like, get me in. But that's a weird one. That's a strange one for me. The under-20s have obviously got things coming up, but to play as Edinburgh and Glasgow, I think would be a great next step for. And I don't know if that's what Mr. Nucifora has got in his plans.
I think, I would be surprised if it's not. And I think if you look at the squads, you think about Glasgow obviously got a lot of injuries, so to be able to fulfil that fixture, they probably did need a couple of Edinburgh extras. And I think that's, on the whole, that's fine if you're borrowing one or two. I think where you're trying to market it as Glasgow and Edinburgh, and then you've got, basically a combined squad, that becomes slightly more difficult. But, in other circumstances, you would have, thinking of the 3 guys from Edinburgh that have re-signed today, Tom Dodd, Connor Boyle, Luke Crosby, are not all guaranteed to be in the starting, the first team. So you could have guys like that. Crosby's obviously a Scotland international who need to play, and actually playing an A game or an under, whatever it is, would be beneficial to them. So yeah, look, I think they can only be good things, and let's hope for more of them.
The thing that made me chuckle, it tickled me about those 3 signing, and I've all 3 of them good guys. I've got so much time for Connor Boyle. He's just had no luck. Tom Dodd, I think, is a quality player and very good guy. Luke, obviously, we all know and love. All 3 of them are injured.
Yeah.
Between the 3 of them, I think I've played as many games this season. So it's that, I hope when these boys come back in, obviously Jamie's leaving, there is competition there. Liam McConnell's coming up, Tom Curry's coming up. That back row, there's a lot of homegrown, young, hungry players. Luke Crosby's still got a lot of rugby in front of him. So's Connor Boyle. Doddy, is somebody who's desperate to play rugby.
Yeah, and I think that's it. But particularly in the case of Connor, it's clearly a bit of a show of faith from Edinburgh, because he hasn't played this season. He wasn't really about much last season. So it does sort of say, well, look, we think there's a player in there, but I just hope he gets back and gets back to kind of the levels that he was at, because he's somebody that had a really high ceiling. I just worry that, the emergence of a Freddie Douglas could...
I was going to say Connor Boyle. Freddie Douglas was Connor Boyle.
Yeah,
Connor
exactly.
Boyle was Freddie Douglas. And Rory Darge was there. Darge goes along the M8 and his takes off. Connor stays, and unfortunately just hasn't been able to stay injury free. But I think that's an exciting thing. And while everybody's sad, and I am as well, to see Jamie go, I think it's a great thing for Jamie and Scottish rugby. But I think it's a great thing for Edinburgh, because now, and this is something lots of us moan about, we want players to play. And some of these bigger lads like Jamie, right, go away, get that experience, bring that back, come and show us and learn from that. But it gives somebody else a shot in the Edinburgh shirt. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's the right time, I think, for Jamie to move somewhere else. And I think he'll be tested in the French rugby is tough. He's not obviously going to be subject to the same sort of rest protocols that he's been part of for the last basically 10 years. So look, I think it's a good move for him.
It's class.
I just think that, and Edinburgh are well stocked. Edinburgh have got loads of good back row, so I think it makes sense. And there's plenty of sort of competition. You talked about Liam, but Liam McConnell, Tom Curry, Freddie Douglas. There's a layer. And then you've got Tom Dodd, Crosby, Connor Boyle is another layer. And then you've still got Hamish, Magnus, and Ben Muncaster. There's a lot of depth there that I think, if you were looking at a player going, the back row's not one you would necessarily be overly worried about.
No, and obviously Hamish is staying. Leinster... I was chatting to somebody the other day, not necessarily Leinster interest, but knowledge of Irish rugby, and they were saying Leinster will absolutely want to put a marker down against Glasgow at the weekend. They did 52-0 in the Cup, and now it's league, business end of the season. Yes, they've nothing necessarily to play for in that they've already got, but they were like, nah, this will be statement from Leinster. They'll go big and they'll try and absolutely better the 52-0. It's like, right, okay. And he also, part of it was they've now not got Europe to worry about.
Yeah, and it's absolutely all eggs in one basket. We have to win a trophy And the one trophy they can win is the URC. And I think, make no mistake, they will want to say, look, we put 50 points on Glasgow last time. If by any sort of chance Glasgow end up going back to Dublin for a third time in a grand final, be under no illusions you are coming here not to win. And that'll certainly be the approach. I would be stunned if Leinster don't go absolutely first choice. And I think like that, you could practically reel off the names, and it's like a who's who.
I'm guessing Geordie won't be on the bench this week.
I mean, having been in Dublin for that 52-0 game, I genuinely can, with no knowledge of that situation, I can only assume that is we have to play the Irish guys before we play Geordie Barrett, because otherwise it just didn't make any sense. He was the best player on the pitch. I know Glasgow were poor, but he was the best player on the pitch by a country mile. And to see him on the bench was just didn't make any sense. If that's, if him and Sneeman and Slimani have been signed with the idea of winning Leinster Champions Cup, well, they've got to play those games. Like, it just was madness.
Yeah, agree. Edinburgh got what they needed at the weekend away to Connacht, and Chico. Chico is one of those, we talk about players we love and that everybody's got a soft spot for. George Horn, Johnny Matthews along the road, but Charlie Shield is probably one of the most popular Edinburgh players, and to see him pull that one out the bag was just I loved that. I absolutely loved it, and he's backed himself. He saw the opportunity and went for it, but then the way he rounded the defenders and backed his speed, I just thought I was so chuffed, and I know his mum and his dad would have been on the roof when they saw that happen. So I was really chuffed for him. What a try.
Do you know the other thing? I was thinking about this. When he makes the break initially, you see that, like, you do see players kind of dummy especially a 9 in that situation, dummy a box kick and then sort of have a go. But the next bit was like what you could have been watching a club game somewhere, that he actually just thinks, do you know what? I'm having a go here. Pins his ears back, and there's a bit of a sort of goose step, and he just takes off. And I thought,
and there's no orange shirt anywhere near him.
Nowhere near him. Like, if he gets tackled,
if he gets, it's a penalty for him holding on, because there's
100%.
nobody near him, not a player within the camera shot.
And I thought, do you know what? Like, it's quite refreshing to watch that and see somebody think.
Refreshing. It's an absolute dream. We survived. We survived another box kick. Good on you, Chico.
Yeah, no, I'm great. And do you know what? I was saying to you before we came on, he was quite honest after the game, because I think he scored that try, Connacht kicked off, and then Charlie had his box kick charged down, and he was like, Edinburgh don't have to make life tough for themselves at times. He was like, what an Edinburgh way to win it. But look, I probably didn't give them much chance a couple of weeks ago, definitely not a couple of months ago after they lost to Zebre. I think when you reflect on where they were once they'd been beaten by Zebre and with the games they had to come, if you said, look, Ulster will have nothing to play for, and you can come to the Hive back at home with a chance of, if you win, you can make the playoffs, I think Edinburgh would probably have taken that. I suppose the other side of that is if they win and end up in 8th or in 7th, you might be going to Dublin or going to Loftus, which are tough old places to win. But I definitely think there has been a sign in the last sort of month of something at Edinburgh that we definitely didn't see at the start of this season, and probably I'm not sure we saw it since Sean took over. So it's a good thing, and long may it continue. Hopefully they win this weekend and get into that top 8.
I think I said 5 weeks ago, that every game for Edinburgh now was a cup final.
Yeah.
You know, Bath was a cup final because there was no tomorrow. Connacht, if that didn't go well, there's no tomorrow. So they kept buying themselves another shot. Ulster, I know other things have to happen, but they can only take care of what they can take care of, and they must win with a bonus point against Ulster. It can be 36-35. Like, it doesn't. Ulster can get whatever they want, doesn't matter. But Edinburgh have to get that winning bonus point.
Yeah, but I think the other thing Edinburgh need to not get drawn into is, I think Edinburgh have to win it by playing how they've played against the the Sharks, and against Bath. I don't think Edinburgh can get drawn into, well, you score 4 tries and we'll score 5, because that's when you inevitably trip up. And, you know, Edinburgh, Ulster will score 5 tries and Edinburgh will score 3. So they need to go about it properly and win the game first. And then I think about, look, teams aren't in the habit now of kicking 3 points. So Edinburgh are going to kick everything to the corner, or if they get within 10 metres, Schumann and Boan and Paddy Harrison are going to tap and go and have a go. I think they have to go about it properly, but they need at the same time that bonus point to be in the back of their minds, and I think that's where somebody like Gilco and Jamie become really important.
No, I don't disagree with any of that. I don't think they're going to throw it around, but they have to win with the bonus point. And things that I was really like for Ross Thompson, he's quite a quiet lad. You know, he's been at Glasgow, although he's an Edinburgh boy. He's been at Glasgow, so he's maybe still working a little bit to get the respect of certain people, and some of the guff that I read on social media. Just, I'm not bitten yet, but I might. So for him to get player of the match on Saturday, I was so chuffed for him. I was really chuffed for him. And I think going into this week, that's a big deal, that the conductor is hopefully flying high with confidence. Chico has maybe bought himself a little bit of kudos that, you know, he might get to play a bit earlier in against Ulster if it's needed to change things, with Ali starting at 9, I'm guessing, obviously, but I would imagine. But I just think the Jamie last game, you know, other boys last game at the Hive, not necessarily playing, but a farewell to Matty Scott, a farewell to some of the boys that are finishing up. But Jamie especially, I mean, Jamie will, I wouldn't be surprised if he took a bit of a lead with the emotion for Friday night, because he's not going to get back again. I think there's a lot on it, and it's a chance to hopefully, no matter what happens elsewhere, finish on a high in front of your own, who, you know, we've discussed this often and we were chatting about on the phone this afternoon, a really loyal support base, sponsor base, business base, you know, the commitment to fill a stand against Saracens in a hastily arranged friendly, to turn up when there's no season ticket allocation for European games against teams we see in the URC. I think they've got a huge opportunity on Friday to do something memorable.
Yeah, totally. I think I remember the last game of last season when it was the sort of goodbye to WP Nell and Big Bill, that, you know, Edinburgh sort of rose to that occasion. They rose to the occasion against Bath. I think the frustration is that too often Edinburgh's level then dips to, you know, that defeat to Zebre or a Dragons or something like that. I think they've shown in the last few weeks that they've played well in these important games. They might not have got the results that they wanted, but they've given themselves a shot against a team, look, who are coming with nothing to lose, but also have nothing to gain. Ulster's heads might be on the beach somewhat, so I think it's there for Edinburgh. You couldn't probably have set it up a fortnight ago much better than if you win and win with a bonus point. The chances are you'll make it, and, you know, look, other results go their way, And it's not out with the sort of realm of, and we discussed this last week, the realm of possibility that Edinburgh could play Glasgow, and all of a sudden, like, they'll really, really fancy that, given what happened in the 1872 Cup. So, look, let's take one step at a time, I suppose. But yeah, I feel quite confident now that Edinburgh will get there. But again, too often we've said that in the past, and they've not delivered.
Something I spoke to players about and coaches about, not Sean, I think it was Stevie Laurie I spoke to after Sharks and Bath. The frustration for me as an Edinburgh supporter, but also a supporter of a long time watching Scottish football or Scottish rugby, that we can produce a result against a really good team, but unfortunately we don't seem to be able to set the bar for other teams to come up to. So we play against France or the Springboks in rugby, or you play against England or whatever, in any sport, you raise your game, but then when you play against somebody else, it drops. Zebre is the classic. For us to draw and lose against Zebre this season, yet get beat by the Sharks by a point, play well against Bath, beat the Bulls. It doesn't make any sense. And consistency is the word that's been used with Edinburgh for probably since Cocker's left, and even probably just before. Consistency has been an issue. I would love Saturday to be Edinburgh dictate the tempo, the physicality, and it's up to Ulster to come and play. Otherwise, we're putting 30 or 40 on you.
Totally, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the other thing, just to say on a slightly different sort of tangent, you talked about Ross Thompson. Actually, our columnist Mark Fletcher wrote a piece this morning saying basically thought it was Ross Thompson's best game for Edinburgh. I probably agree with that. But I think over the last sort of month, and as much as I've sung the praises of James Lang, I've actually been really impressed with the role that Mosese has played in the squad. And I think, like that Bath game, you think he was thrown on pretty early, Matt Curry to go to the wing. It was all a bit of a rejig. But, only a week ago, Mosese was telling me and others that he wanted to go on the Scotland tour, and now his season's finished, and I think he's having an operation tomorrow. So, that's pretty tough on him after actually what was probably a tough start, because he'd come here from the Waratahs basically having not played a lot of professional rugby and was thrown straight in. So it's been tough, but I think there's enough. We've seen enough now in the last sort of couple of months that makes me think there is a player there. There's a lot of potential, so let's give him a bit of time.
Yeah, I think that's what was needed. But he came across as Sione's brother, so there was an expectation that he was going to do what Sione does. The difference that Mosese gives you, and I spoke to an Edinburgh player who was talking to me about this on Sunday, saying Mosese's got a real bit of dog and fight in him. Langer has been playing well. He's a playmaker. Yes, he can defend, and I think he fights way above his weight, but he's not got that kind of mongrel about him that Mosese's got. A bit of that leaguey in him that's a straight up and down. Curry, I think, is class and should have been on a British Lions tour, because I think the kid's phenomenal, but he's had to bounce around between the wing and 13, and that flexibility is counted against him. It's an interesting three, and I rate Matt Scott really highly. I'm gutted with the way things have finished for him, and I tip my hat to him, because what a career he's had, while always being a really top man. But Lang, you and I have sung Langer's praises over and over, especially probably since January. Yeah. And I thought him and Curry were really beginning to come together. You're right, Mo came on and did a good job. I thought I'd really like to see Ross, Langer and Curry finish strongly, and put a real marker down on Friday night to say, right, this is us.
Yeah, and I think, we've talked about, there's actually a question here that I'll bring up. This was sent in earlier. With the Ireland and Scotland combinations be kept together, will Aki play with Jones? I mean, what a prospect, Bundy Aki and Hugh Jones, or Sione Tuipulotu and Gary Ringrose. Like, we know what Huey Pilotu can do. We know what Bundy and Ringrose can do, but like, how good would that be? And as you said,
I agree, but I think both of those centre partnerships it'd be interesting, like, for them to play with Finn Russell.
Yeah.
Like, for Bundy Aki to play with Finn, I think I could play at 13 with the speed of the ball and the way Finn can orchestrate things, and with the space that Bundy Aki creates. I think being Hugh Jones could absolutely fly and make himself a test centre. Now I'm not putting Sione down here. Aki, while he's aggressive and Bundy is another level, but I think Sione's got more rugby, and there's a bit. I think Sione has the ability to play at 13, whereas Bundy doesn't. And I'd half joked, but there is a bit of me would love to see Bundy at 12 and Sione at 13 and go, right, stop this, although the wingers might get a bit bored. But I think that could be incredible. It's really exciting. The 12 and 13 is really exciting, and to have them and then Blair at 15, for me, it's Jameson Gibson Park conducting the orchestra, then you hand it on to Finn. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. And the reason I brought that up just now was because we're talking about units and combinations and sticking with the Ireland front row or the Leinster locks or whatever it might be. And I think that's part of this for Edinburgh is over the last 4 or 5 weeks and the next maybe 2 or 3, somebody like a Ross Thompson and James Lang could be saying, well, actually, Gregor, if you're thinking about picking this guy, Matt Curry, to replace Hugh Jones at 13 for Scotland, we are also putting our hands up because I think, let's be honest, we know Tom Jordan's likely to be in that team somewhere. We know that Stafford McDowell will be there or thereabouts, but we're not absolutely sure who's at 13, who's at 12, who's at 10, and who's at fullback with all the Lions guys away. So there are opportunities for somebody like Ross and James Lang to say, actually, pick us, because as a 3, we've gone pretty well, was my point. And I think while Glasgow are struggling, it's a chance for Edinburgh maybe to some Edinburgh's players to make a mark with that summer tour in mind. On which note, like if Ben Muncaster doesn't play in 2 or 3 of those games, there's something far wrong because he's been phenomenal the last few weeks.
Yeah, the Scotland touring party, I'm interested in that because other players who are given you can have some time off, which I would hate. But do you also need to have boys in because they might get the call for the Lions? Are you more likely to get a call for the Lions if you're on tour or if you're on your holidays? I don't know. I would imagine there'll be much more in-depth chats than you and I on a Tuesday night on that one. But the combination thing, just very quickly on that, if the Lions tours were even 20 years ago, I don't think that would matter because there's time. Now there's not the time, so I think you're maybe right. It does become a bit more important. For Scotland, it's a weird one because when you think you're taking out 5 of your first choice backline, then you have to try new things because you don't know what you're going to get. You got who is going to play 10? Is it Ross or Adam? Are they the next cabs off the rank, or is Tom Jordan? Like there's a little bit to that, and then 12, it would seem at Stafford.
But then it's almost certainly Stafford if you take Tom Jordan out of the 12 equation, and then where do you put? There's Rory Hutchinson feature as a 12 or a 13. Like there are a lot of parts to it. I think, but to go back to your point earlier, the guys got a rest. I don't think they do. I think when we last time we spoke to Gregor was after the game in Paris, and he said he would go he was minded at that time to go as strong as they could. I don't think that'll have changed massively because if you look at the positions that they've not got through Lions call-ups or possibly through injuries, I think if you rested another winger, you might be down to fourth choice, for example, and there is every chance. I've said this before. Like those first 2 games are really tough I'm not saying Samoa's not tough, but the Maori All Blacks and then Fiji are tough prospects. And if you roll into that Samoa game 0 from 2, it starts to look like not a very great tour. So yeah, I think like to Jamie and Darcy and the guys who've missed out on Lions selection, Rory Dard's another one who's not really been mentioned. Look, I think they'll tour with Scotland.
I'm still entering the Friday afternoon 533 grand on 4th so I can go to the Fiji-Scotland game in Fiji, because I think that might just become my little piece of heaven. Samoa, Eden Park, the Samoan community in Auckland, I think, is bigger than the Samoan community in Samoa. So I kind of get it from a finance point of view and from a logistical point of view, but I'm sad it's not in Samoa. It's one of those things that, I just have to, well, it's not doing me anyway, but I wish it was there.
There are issues with the Samoan Union and all that kind of stuff that probably this isn't the forum for. That I can understand why it's being played at Eden Park, but like again, there's a lot of that Scotland team probably. I'm thinking about who'll replace Xander. You think of somebody like a Will Hurd or an Elliot Miller-Mills. Could you have envisaged they were playing at Eden Park in a test match? Like it's a great occasion, but also it's an important tour that will determine those the last 2 games will determine Scotland's world ranking place for the end of the year. And I think the World Cup draw is starting next year. So look, it'll be an important summer that Scotland can't sort of let it slide because there's a Lions tour going on.
I wonder if Edinburgh's new signings, Scottish qualified, get to go to that tour and be made Scottish.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is an interesting point. I think you wonder, would some of them have been on the radar for a call, in the autumn or last year, or did they get a call up this autumn? And is there a similar package where it's 4 games plus maybe an A game against a Portugal again or Georgia or who knows? But it feels like it might be a step too far to take kind of, don't want to call them development players, but players who are that further step away from Test rugby.
Playing the Maori in Whangarei, that will just be an absolute belter. That will be class.
A great game, a great occasion, the start of a great tour. I think it's obviously disappointing from a Scottish point of view that the likes of Finn and stuff aren't on that, but it's a great chance to again build a bit of depth and look at other options.
I think it's class. I love it. I'm quite happy to be missing those boys because they're on a Lions tour, and to play those 3 games, I love the Maori. I remember when they played at Hawick. Just class, just love it. And then to play Fiji and Samoa, magic. So this weekend you've got you didn't get to go to Ireland, do you? Are you watching on telly, or are you getting a wee trip to Dublin's Fair City?
No, it'll be television duty this weekend. I'll be at the Hive with you on Friday, so if you could keep the shouting to a minimum,
unlikely.
That would be handy.
Unlikely. The forecast for that is pretty poor, I have to admit.
Yeah, I did think that, and then
it's my last go, big fella. It's my last chance. I've got months worth, months and months enthusiasm and energy to get pumped out of that microphone on.
I thought for a minute there you had delivered a second Scotland Rugby News exclusive, and you were telling us that was you standing down. But
well, I'm a bit like Trent. I'm still waiting for the new contract. It's like I'm a free agent. So
you're telling us that come August or September, you like Trent will be living it up for Real Madrid.
Well, Bath enjoyed what I got up to. They were very complimentary. I spoke to Tarquin, the CEO, after the game, and he was very complimentary.
Was it Leinster that were very complimentary of your Cian Healy
Yeah, Cian Healy. Rudy Strowley said I could come to South Africa and do it for them. So, hey, you never know.
I think Rudy Strowley wanted you in South Africa when they were in Edinburgh.
Yeah, I gave him a wee bit of cheek that he wasn't overly impressed with, but geez, I don't think I've ever seen anybody's hands any bigger or anybody eat a slab of red meat any quicker. What a big lump of a human that is. Nah, it's been good. Listen, I just want them to finish on a high. The Bath thing was an amazing thing, but I don't want it to be the only snowball in December. I would like there to be another chance on Friday, and if it keeps the season going a wee bit longer, I think that's a good thing, because it might just give a couple of boys a chance to play at that next level and show a little bit of what they can do. So, it's all good, and I hope Glasgow get back on a horse. I mean, how cool would it be if we were talking about Glasgow getting something out of Leinster away? I think it's a pretty big ask, but they've done daft stuff before, so why not this weekend?
Yeah, let's wait and see. I think you're right. I would like to think I hope we're talking about 1 win, 2 would be great, but that feels like maybe a long shot at the minute. But I think, as I said earlier, I think if Glasgow can show a bit more of themselves going into the quarterfinal, they've obviously then got both teams would have a week off to get themselves right for their prospective playoff games if that's what happens. So yeah, let's wait and see. But I feel quite optimistic now that we could have 2 Scottish teams in the playoffs. And watch that last line come back to bite me next
bite you in the backside. Yeah, and we've run out of time. You've not even been able to tell you about my Saturday night, so we'll pick that one up another day. But Saber for Gladiator says hi. I'll just drop that one in.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Yeah, so you were at did you tell us about that very quickly? You were at the Dundee Sport Awards, weren't you?
The Dundee Sport Awards with Colleen Barreto. What a top man he is. Jeez, got so much time for him.
He's another one that, like, if he didn't have bad luck, he would have no luck at all.
Oh, that operation he's had is grim. So he was there on his crutches, but he's so positive. I mean, he's an incredible kid, but so much kid. He's not a kid anymore, but so much energy and enthusiasm. Very, very humble. He was class. And then Shelley McCoy, aka Saber, broke 3 Scottish records at the weekend. 1 for a clean and jerk, 1 for a snatch, and 1 for a combination. So she's Scottish champion, trying to get into the Commie Games. Class. That was an enjoyable evening in Dundee. Let's just put it that way. That was an enjoyable evening. Still think about it. Let's yeah.
Better than having to watch Glasgow and Edinburgh, particularly Glasgow back to back, off the TV. That was Glasgow on Saturday was a tough watch. So I think your Saturday was probably slightly better than mine.
Well, I enjoyed it, but I had to get paid the big bucks like you, so that's how it goes. Anyway, we'll finish with a quick word from our sponsor. The Scotland Rugby News is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV today. With thousands of jobs across Scotland, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs, so start your search now. Great to see you. Have a great weekend, whatever you're up to, wherever you are, whether it's Edinburgh, Glasgow, Clubland, Sevens, wherever you go, do it well and enjoy. And for now, Gavlar, good to see you. Catch you next week, pal.
See you at the Hive on Friday night.